Take a breath with me for a second and consider something strange. Maybe the people who trigger us the most are not interruptions to our growth. Maybe they are the curriculum. Every irritation is a mirror. Every reaction is a clue. Every judgment is a doorway. The world becomes a kind of spiritual gym. Not where we go to prove we're better than others, but where we train in self-awareness, in humility and compassion. What is this showing me about myself? That question alone can turn an ordinary moment of irritation into a doorway to a new perspective. Welcome back, my fellow strangers, to another episode of Traversing the Strange World. And I'm your host, Isaiah Danbury, and this is another installment of Thursday Journal. Notes from the Strange World. Today's episode is going to be about our judgments towards others, and what does that say about us? So here we go. There's a line from Jesus that almost everybody knows. Even people who don't go to church, even people who don't like religion. Judge not, lest ye be judged. It's one of those verses people quote at others, but rarely sit with themselves. Because if we're honest, most of us don't mind judging, we just don't like being judged. But Jesus didn't stop there. He goes on to say, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but fail to notice the beam in your own? That image is almost funny. A man with a plank of wood sticking out of his own face, trying to perform eye surgery on someone else. And here's the thing. Jesus isn't just talking about manners, he's talking about human nature. In modern psychology, there's a concept called projection. Projection is when we take something inside ourselves, a trait, a fear, a weakness, a desire we don't want to admit, and we see it in someone else instead. It's easier to call someone else arrogant than to face our own pride. It's easier to call someone else lazy than to deal with our own lack of discipline. It's easy to say they're angry than to sit with the rage we've buried. So we point, we criticize, we moralize. Carl Jung had a word for this hidden part of us. He called it the shadow. The shadow is made of the traits we reject in ourselves, the parts we say, no, not me, I'm not like that. But those traits don't disappear. They go underground. And from there, they influence us anyway, subconsciously. Here's the twist. The qualities we judge most harshly in others are often qualities we cannot accept in ourselves. If someone's confidence irritates you, you might be disconnected from your own strength. If someone's laziness enrages you, you might be at war with your own need of rest. If someone's arrogance triggers you, you might be suppressing your own desire to be seen. Jung believed that until we face the shadow, we don't see people clearly. We see our projections. So when we think we're evaluating them, we may actually be encountering the parts of us we left in the dark. That beam in your own eye that Jesus talked about. Jung might say, that's the shadow. There's a quote that I love from the philosopher Baruch Spinoza. When Peter talks about Paul, we learn more about Peter than we do about Paul. In other words, when we talk about other people, especially with strong emotion, we're often revealing ourselves. Our judgments are rarely just about them. They're windows into us. What we condemn loudly may be what we secretly wrestle with. What disgusts us may be what we fear we're capable of. What triggers us often points to an unresolved wound inside us. So every time we say, I can't stand people like that, there's a quiet question underneath. Why does this hit me so deeply? Judge not doesn't mean pretend nothing is wrong. It doesn't mean we abandon discernment. It means before you correct the world, maybe confront yourself. Before you try to fix your neighbor, examine your own heart. Before you condemn someone else's darkness, make peace with the darkness you carry. Because unexamined judgment is often just self-rejection in disguise. And that's why judgment feels so intense sometimes. It's personal. We don't realize how personal. And then there's this idea within Hasidic Judaism. There's a concept that the faults we notice in others are often shown to us by heaven because they exist in some form within ourselves. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidim, taught that when you see a flaw in another person, look for where that same flaw lives in you, in thought, in speech, or in action. Not necessarily in the same form, but in spirit. Maybe you don't lie the way you do, but do you bend the truth in subtler ways? Do you bend the truth to yourself? Do you lie to yourself? Do you not ask yourself the questions that you know you need to ask yourself, or admit things to yourself that you know you need to admit? Maybe you don't explode in anger, but do you carry quiet resentment? In this view, judgment becomes a divine diagnostic tool, not to shame you, but to help you grow. It's not random, it's an invitation. Instead of saying, why are they like that? The Hasidic path asks, what is this here to teach me about myself? The spiritual path, the psychological path, they both actually agree here. The real work is inward. Instead of asking what's wrong with them, we start asking, what is this stirring up in me? Instead of saying they are the problem, we say, what part of me feels threatened or hurt or exposed? That shift doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerously self-aware. And self-aware people, they don't need to shout as much. They don't need to shame as much. They don't need to judge as much because they're too busy doing that hard work on themselves, sawing away out of that beam sticking out of their own eye. So maybe judge not isn't just a moral command. Maybe it's an invitation. An invitation to trade blame for awareness, to trade outrage for introspection, to trade condemnation for growth. Because every harsh judgment we make is a chance to look in the mirror instead. And that mirror, as uncomfortable as it is, might be the very place we find real change. And before we go tonight, I want to leave you with two thoughts. The first comes from a reflection shared by Joe Rogan. An idea that sounds simple at first but carries real weight if you sit with it. Imagine that every person you meet is you living a different life. That every human being is another version of you, experiencing the world from a different angle. If you truly saw people that way, would it change? Would it change how you treat them? Just imagine that for a moment. The stranger, the person who annoys you, the one you disagree with, the one you've already made up your mind about. What if they're not just the other? What if they are another expression of the same human story, shaped by different wounds, different loves, different fears, different chances? It becomes a lot harder to reduce someone to a label when you imagine being born into their exact circumstances. And that leads into the second thought. which is from Aaron Weiss of the band mewithoutYou. He said, one of the most loving things you can do for another person is to say, I don't know you. Because then, maybe for the very first time, you'll take the time to try. That's humility. That's mercy. That is the opposite of judgment. Because judgment says, I already know what kind of person you are. The love says, I don't fully understand your story, but I'm willing to. When we combine these two ideas, something powerful happens, I believe. We stop seeing people as categories to sort and start seeing them as lives to respect. We trade certainty for curiosity, assumption for listening, judgment for wonder. And maybe that's the real invitation behind judge not, lest ye be judged. Not to shut off discernment, not to pretend harm doesn't exist, but to walk through the world remembering every face is a mystery, every life is a universe, every person is more than the moment you're seeing. So perhaps the next time judgment rises up in you, hot and quick, pause and breathe, and try replacing the story in your head with two simple truths. That could be me in another life, and I don't know them, but I'm willing to try. Like Jordan Peterson said, assume the person that you're talking to might know something that you don't. And in that space, between not knowing and still caring, compassion has room to grow. Your actions are revealing you. Judgment isn't just about morality, it's about self-awareness. And this doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior. It doesn't mean we stop having standards. It means we hold two truths at once. I can recognize wrong in the world and still ask what this stirs in me. That's maturity, and I think that's inner work. That's how the beam starts coming out. So, my fellow strangers, questions to walk away with. Who have I judged most harshly lately? What exactly about them bothers me? Where might that trait show up in my life, even in a smaller or more acceptable form? When I criticize others, what emotion is underneath? Anger, envy, fear, or shame? What part of myself do I work hardest to hide from the rest of the world? Do I allow in myself the same humanity and imperfection I demand from others? What would it look like to treat this moment of judgment as a mirror instead of a weapon? And if this irritation is a teacher, what lesson might it be offering me right now? And maybe every judgment we cast is a doorway. We can walk towards it inward towards bitterness, or we can walk towards self-knowledge. All right, and I think that's where I'm going to wrap up the Thursday journal. Notes from the strange world. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Thank you for taking a little peek into the journal of a modern man living in a strange land. And you know what? I don't say any of this as somebody who does all of this perfectly. Absolutely not. No, I still have plenty of harsh judgments towards people that I got to work on. I'm just a fellow stranger here in this strange land, joining y'all in the struggle. All right, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So until next time, let's keep traversing this strange world. Let's always be inquisitive. Let's always be introspective. Let's remember to be neighborly to folks, because we're just kind of thrown into this life thing. So at the end of the day, we're all just strangers in a strange land. Until next time, peace.